Have you ever gone to a place that used to mean something to you and it just felt different? Not in a bad way, just different. That's how the Montgomery Mall feels to me. If you grew up around here, you know what I mean. This wasn't just a mall, it was a place somewhere where you went when you didn't really have anywhere else to be, somewhere your parents dragged you to, somewhere you met friends, and somewhere where you just honestly wanted to kill some time. And now it is quiet, not empty, just quiet. And I don't want to make this episode about bashing it or making fun of it. I actually think there's some value and some really interesting things about this place and what it represents, because this isn't just a story about a mall. It's a story about how places change, how real estate cycle evolves, how communities evolve, and what happens when something that used to serve people no longer fits the way people live. So today I want to talk about Montgomery Mall, what happened to it, what might happen next, and what this teaches us about real estate community and long-term thinking. Not as a developer, not as a politician, just as a local realtor, a dad, and someone who cares about where we ultimately live. Let me ask you guys something. What store do you remember most from the Montgomery Mall? Was it Sears, the food court, the arcade? For me, it was definitely the arcade, playing Time Crisis 2. That one random store you never planned to buy from, but somehow always did, or the store that you would always go to and never buy anything. Malls were never really about shopping. That's the point. They were about presence, and you didn't go there with a checklist. You went to walk and to see people and to feel like you were part of something, and that's actually what matters, right? Because real estate is not just about structures, it's about what those structures represent. And malls were designed to be town centers without actually being town centers. Climate controlled, predictable, suburban versions of downtown, right? And Montgomery Mall was exactly that, which is why seeing it now kind of feels strange. When you came back and you thought, hey, did something feel off here? Was it when a big store closed, or was it when fewer people were walking around? Or was it when you realized you had not been there in years? And that moment matters, because that is when a property starts dying long before anyone calls it dead. And most people think malls die because of Amazon. That is part of it, but it is not the full story. Malls did not die. They stopped evolving. They were built for a specific moment in time. Car culture, suburban sprawl, weekend shopping as entertainment. But ultimately, guys, culture has changed, whether we like it or not. And people wanted experiences and not corridors. They wanted walkability, not parking lots. They wanted connection, not food courts. They wanted flexibility, not fixed retail boxes. And malls ultimately just did not adapt. And e-commerce sped up everything, right? Online shopping, the pandemic hit, anchor stores, the big box stores, they started leaving. And once anchor stores leave, everything else collapses. So foot traffic tends to drop, small tenants leave, maintenance decline, ownership starts making cuts, whole vibe changes. So do you think the Montgomery Mall declined because of online shopping, or because it stopped serving the way people live now? Because those are two different problems. One is unstoppable, the other is fixable. Here is what most people do not realize. Dead malls are not failures. They are just misused land. And I want you to think about that. These properties sit on massive parcels, prime location, major road access, and infrastructure that's already built, right? I already talked about town centers, right? It has electric, water, sewer, parking. This is rare. It has all the utilities built in, and that makes them incredibly valuable, and it also makes it incredibly expensive. So across the country, dead malls are being turned into housing, town centers, mixed use communities, medical campuses, universities, fulfillment centers. And some of these redevelopments completely transform the town, not because they replaced retail, but because they replaced it with relevance. So the real question is not why did this mall die? It is, what is this land supposed to be now? If you could redesign this entire property, what would you build there? Would it be apartments, a walkable downtown, a green space, a community center? These are all questions you might want to ask, and the vision for real estate. Let me paint a picture. You guys might already know, but let me tell you what it feels like to walk through Montgomery Mall right now. It does not feel abandoned, but it definitely does not feel alive. It feels a bit suspended. So some stores are still open, some are gone, and I'm going to use some very loosely, right? A lot of them are closed. I'm just going to be real with you. You hear your own footsteps more than you hear other people, and that silence is pretty loud. and not in a creepy way, in a kind of a reflective way. You start noticing space, and you start noticing time, and you start noticing how much of this place was built for a version of life that does not honestly exist anymore. And that is the part that it sounds cheesy, but it kind of emotionally hits me because nothing is technically wrong. The floors are still there, the lights still work, the building still stands, but the purpose, unfortunately, is gone. And that is what kills real estate, not the damage, not the age or irrelevance. It is the irrelevance, I should say. Buildings don't die when they fall apart. They die when they no longer match how people live. And the Montgomery Mall feels like a place that has not caught up to the present time, which is sad, but also very interesting because that is where opportunity also comes up, right? And I want to make this a bit more local in content because this is not hypothetical or theoretical. We are watching this happen in real time. Plymouth Meeting Mall is under contract, big redevelopment plans, mixed use, housing, restaurants, walkable spaces, something that actually feels like a town instead of like a shopping box. And people are excited because it's not just a mall anymore. It's becoming a place that is what Montgomery Mall could be. And here's the thing, what happens next on ownership, zoning, community pressure, and vision, if those do not align, places like this, they don't collapse. They tend to fade. And let me ask you something. What would actually make you go there again? Not hypothetically. What would actually make you want to go back to the mall for real? Would you make that land relevant to your life? And those are questions that you really want to ask yourself, because let's talk about what nobody really wants to talk about. What is actually planned for the Montgomery Mall? And the honest answer is this: there is no official redevelopment plan announced yet. And there's no big press release, no confirmed mixed use proposal plan or township master plan. And that actually matters because that tells us something important. The place is not finished, it's still undecided. And right now, the mall is owned by Cohan Retail Investment Group. They are known for buying struggling malls cheap, keeping them operational, and leasing out whatever space they can. That is why you still see a few national tenants pop up and seasonal shops hanging on, but they're not known for major visionary redevelopments, which means Montgomery Mall is kind of in the limbo. It's not really dead, not reborn. It's just kind of waiting. Honestly, it's profitable. That is actually a bit more interesting than a finished plan because when something has no plan, it has potential. And here is another detail most people do not realize. The Wegmans parcel was sold separately. So that is usually the first sign of long-term repositioning. Not dramatic, not flashy, just a structural thing. So when malls start getting carved into parcels, it becomes easier to redevelop piece by piece instead of all at once, kind of like what Plymouth Meeting is kind of doing, and that opens doors. So let me ask you, if you could decide what happens here, what would you want? More housing, a town center, a green space, a community hub, something totally different? I'm not sure. But because the future of this site is not a real estate decision, it is a community decision. And those two they don't always align. Everyone has an opinion about what should happen to a place like this. People want to turn it into housing. Some people want to turn it into a park or a town center or something really cool. And they're all great ideas, but what people do not know or do not see is how complicated this is, how complicated it actually is. Redevelopment is not just a design and a decision. It's a political decision, a zoning decision, definitely a financial decision, and a community decision. So you have multiple people who are stakeholders in all of this. So there are owners who want returns. There's the township who wants a tax revenue. There's neighbors who don't want traffic. And there's residents who want amenities. And then there's developers who want density. So all these people want different things. So when people ask, why has Montgomery Mall not been redeveloped? The answer, I'm hoping, should not be laziness, because it's typically not. It's typically friction, because multiple cooks are in the kitchen, right? And then there's zoning laws, there's environmental studies, there's traffic reports, public hearings, there's infrastructure capacity, school district requirements and parking requirements. I mean, none of that is None of that is easy, none of that's sexy, but all of it decides on what happens. And this is why so many properties just sit, not because no one cares, but because alignment is rare and real estate only moves when alignment happens. Sometimes the best opportunities are not the flashy ones, there are the stuck ones, right? Because stuck means undecided and undecided means possibility. This is where it kind of gets personal here because there's community versus development. Because redevelopment is not just about buildings; it's about identity. People don't resist change because they're stubborn. They resist change because they are afraid of losing what they can recognize, even if they recognize no longer it works. Someone might say, "I don't want apartments, there. I don't want traffic. I don't want it to feel like a city. I don't want it to change." But here's the truth, it already changed. It is already changed, guys. It just changed into something honestly empty. So the real question is not whether change should happen, it is whether we want to shape it or let it happen to us. Montgomery Mall represents a choice, a point of a choice, right? And do we let it fade or do we decide what it becomes? Because one of those options is passive and the other is a bit more intentional. And the intentional community, the intentional communities age a bit better. And kind of talking about why this hits me a bit personally is, I'll just be real with you. I think about this stuff differently now because that I am a dad, not in like a dramatic way, but just in kind of like a long-term way, a long-term thinking way. I think about my son, about what my son will remember about where he grew up, not the square footage, not the finishes, not the interest rates, the places, right? The places, meaning the parks, the walks, the spaces, the feeling of safety, the feeling of belonging. And malls kind of play that role, and now they don't. And so it's kind of a weird feeling because what replaces them? Because ultimately something has to. If we do not intentionally design places for people to gather, connect, walk, play, live, we end up with empty corridors and massive parking lots. And the mall right now is just a place where people are walking around right now, literally. And this is not a community, this is leftover space. And the land is rare. And how can we use it and say a lot about what we value? This ultimately provides opportunity. This is where the real estate lens really matters. When people hear dead mall, they think failure. As an investor, buyer, or homeowner, I hear repositioning. Yes, repositioning. And this land already has infrastructure, as I mentioned. It already has road access and already sits on a known corridor. You can't easily recreate that. If the Montgomery Mall were announced tomorrow as a mixed-use town center with apartments, green space, walkable retail, and local businesses, what do you think would happen to nearby home values? Well, it would freaking move up. I'll tell you that much, and it will move very, very quickly because proximity to lifestyle beats proximity to shopping. And let me ask you, would you rather live near a dying mall or a vibrant town center like King of Prussia? That answer tells you where values are heading. Real estate is not about what something was, it is about what something is becoming. Here is the bigger lesson Montgomery Mall teaches us. Real estate is cyclical, right? Everything has a season. Retail had a season, malls had a season. Now something else is next. And the people who win in real estate are not the ones who cling to the past. They are the ones who see the next chapter early. Dead malls are not mistakes, okay? They are just signals. They tell us what no longer works, and that is just a valuable lesson. And if you are buying, investing, or building over the next 10 years, this mindset matters. Do not ask what something is, ask what something is becoming. I want to end with this. It's kind of emotional. I know I didn't mean to make this all emotional, but Montgomery Mall is not sad. It is not unfinished. It is just a chapter that has not been rewritten yet. And that is how I see most real estate. Not fixed, not final, not dead, just kind of waiting around. And so the next time you drive by it, do not think about what it lost, think about what it can become. And if you live in Montgomery County, you're not just watching this happen, you are part of it, and ultimately your voice matters, your community matters, and if you have thoughts on what should replace places like this, I want to hear them. Drop a comment, send me a message. Let's talk about what our towns should look like 20 years from now, not just the next quarter, because real estate is not about buildings, it's about life, and life always changes.
John Lee Real Estate, find you the best rate. All throughout Philly like Schuylkill Expressway. Talking to people who out of